Big question for a lot of people is what lies between here and there. How do we help businesses and individuals get from this point to some future point when a vaccine is available and we start to see the world opening up? We have seen a lot of support being offered in this country by governments. And now the question is, of course, how do they roll out? What do they look like? And how much can they change the story for people who are hard hit by this pandemic? We're very pleased to have with us Development and Workforce Development Minister Carla Qualtrough. Thank you for being with us, Minister. We do appreciate your time. And I actually just want to start with an update on where we are on some important bills, because the government has introduced bills. We need passage to get them into place. And then, of course, there's still some action that has to happen to get that money into people's hands and training to start happening. Where are we?
A couple of things. So on the training front, there's no legislative requirement. The money was funding for the $1.5 billion investment in training we announced last week was in a previous law in C4, which is now passed. So that's good. With respect to wage subsidy and commercial rent, as you know, that bill is still in the Senate. In the meantime, we're working to do as much as we can behind the scenes. But until this is law, we can't deliver it. People will, though, be able to apply backdated to the end of September.
So that Bill C9, what's the prospect from this? I mean, obviously, everybody is aware, including the Senate, of how there's an urgency to all of this. What are the issues, as you understand them, that's slowing down the passage of that bill?
I think people are digging in. We're back to a parliamentary reality that's closer to what we had prior to the pandemic. Things aren't passing as quickly, and people are asking fairly questions about how can we make this better? What will this mean? How will it be implemented? I apologize. My phone's ringing in the background. Someone will get it.
That's right.
And working from home as a cabinet minister, and we're really encouraging senators to just get it through, get it going, make it happen.
So, and then let's just talk about the support. So obviously those that come in C9 are super important. We know rent support is massively important. When you think about the things you're putting in place now, Minister, that will help beyond this, we can now have maybe an end in sight, right? Sometime next year, we think we have a vaccine in everybody's hands. What are the training, what are the supports that you're putting in place that you consider to be non-emergency but more longer term supports that will help us after this pandemic?
Really good question. So there's a consensus amongst employment ministers across the country and around the world that our recovery will depend on significant investment in training. And so we made a down payment on that last week with the $1.5 billion. We committed in the speech from the throne to make the largest investment in training in the history of our country. It's going to be pivotal, both to train up the people who are in their jobs so they can keep them, and to fill the jobs that we have a skills mismatch for in this country. And of course, anticipating the jobs of the future. There's always a tie to training when you look at job creation and job retention. Obviously, training is pivotal to that. So we announced this $1.5 billion through the provinces, through existing agreements. There's no need to renegotiate anything. We've all agreed on the amounts. Through existing networks of service deliverers, again, nothing new, just getting money into the hands of employers and workers.
And as you say, this does go to the provinces. Are there specific industries that the federal government wants the provinces to target? I mean, are there places that you believe there will be more growth than others?
Again, that's really regional, as you understand. But yeah, absolutely. So we know hospitality, we know tourism. We also know some sectors are going to have, their workers are going to have to pivot into different jobs. And so supporting those sectors, but we're really working with the provinces and setting priorities on sectors most impacted by COVID, letting them drive the priorities because they know their regions best.
So just in terms of how we're still waiting for, obviously, a real fiscal picture from the government. In terms of how the cabinet is talking about the priorities, a balance between ongoing emergency needs, spending that you could consider to be kind of more midterm, post-pandemic help, and then concern about the deficit. Where does that factor into anybody's thinking these days?
Really good question. So we always, I don't think we talk quite the same way of balancing the economy and public health. We really think that we have to invest in public health in order to have a strong economy. It's not, the conversation that's happening around a balance is not the one we have. We really are all in and investing in whatever public health measures we need to do to keep our citizens safe and healthy, and that will benefit ultimately the economy. We know, of course, that as the Prime Minister has said, our resources are not infinite, but every dollar we invest in things like training will yield a significant payback for the economy in the future. And that's really when I talk about, we made this commitment to create 1 million jobs, taking us back to pre-pandemic levels. For me, that's about shoring up the jobs we have, filling the jobs, because there are jobs unfilled in Canada, and creating jobs. And that's really what we're focused on with everything we do.
Is there any piece of this, when we talk about the 1 million jobs and getting us back to where we were, how do you factor in the theory that we're pivoting a little bit away from some of our traditional industries? And I'm thinking particularly, Minister, of the energy industry, where if and when we get oil prices back to where they may be, it may well be that sometime next year they're back at $55 a barrel. Is the government supportive of training in that sector as much as it is in other sectors?
Absolutely. And in fact, some of the most significant investments in a green economy and green jobs of the future is being done right now in this country by the oil sector, by the energy sector more broadly. Listen, we know that jobs aren't going to necessarily look like what they do now. That's always been the reality in the history of the world, I suppose. But we're going to support workers and train up people. If there's jobs, we're going to fill them, and we're going to skill people to fill them. And if there aren't jobs, we're going to make sure that we can be there for the workforce. It's totally in our self-interest as a country to make sure that we have good jobs and people to fill them.
We're just getting headlines. We get the daily press briefing, of course, from the Premier of Ontario. We know that more restrictions are coming, and he says that confirming that they will announce further restrictions in the hardest hit areas. Such a big tension, Minister, between the businesses that are desperate to stay open, people who are desperate to be able to continue to go to work, and then this need to contain. How do you think we're doing on that balance?
It's really tough. It's happening here in BC too. Of course, you've seen our numbers. I hear every day from businesses who desperately want to stay open, but they also want to keep us safe. And as I said, there's a bit of a longer term gain in terms of, again, flattening this curve. The quicker we flatten it, the more businesses we're going to be able to open, the less restrictive we'll be able to be. And quite frankly, I think we've learned from how we approach the broad measures we took in the first one. But every province is wholeheartedly trying to figure out what works for their people and their businesses. And our interest is providing the underlying support for business and workers, whatever happens. The wage subsidy for businesses to stay open, the recovery benefit for workers who will not be able to work. We're taking a pan-Canadian approach to worker and business supports so that we can allow provinces to regionally approach their own measures.
Minister, we appreciate your time today. Thanks for being with us. Carla Qualtrough is Canada's Employment and Economic and Workforce Development Minister,